Hi and welcome. It's Jill Hutchison with your 7th part in this Think and Grow Rich Mastermind series. Today we're going to be talking about the epilogue, where Napoleon Hill covers the 7 basic fears. The epilogue is the final chapter in the book. And as you can see, it's quite a fat book. If you only have time to read one chapter, I really recommend that you read the epilogue because it kind of covers everything. It's a nice summary for the whole thing. I particularly like reading about the basic fears because it forces us to realize and to reflect, I guess, to see what we're doing that we could change to get better results. So let's get into the epilogue. Now, the epilogue starts on page 239, and it comes immediately after the chapter on the 6th sense. Now, we can't go through every single chapter on this series, so we're not going to cover the 6th sense. But just know you can obviously read those chapters, and on your email you would have got your weekly emails that cover every single chapter. It says how to outwit the 6 ghosts of fear. So how to outwit the 6 ghosts of fear. You know, fear is such a powerful motivating driver for people. We either move towards something we want or away from something that we don't want. Here's the thing, if we don't know what we do want, then everything is motivated by moving away from what we don't want. And I don't think that's particularly healthy, because when we're moving away from things we don't want, we're only really consistent insofar as when we actually achieve that. So when we move just far enough away from that fear so that we don't feel it anymore, then we stop being motivated, and we tend to kind of slip back into old habits. Then it gets really painful or fearful again, and then we get motivated. So I'm not sure if I'm making this really clear, because I've had a weekend of Easter chocolates. So my brain is not as sharp as it normally is. But think of, there was a really silly comic of a dog sitting on a nail, and that dog is motivated only to stand up for as long as the pain, the pain is intense enough to make it stand up. Once it gets off that pain, it forgets about that pain, and it's no longer motivated. So when we're moving away from what we don't want, so if we're moving away from debt, for example, when we get out of debt, we cease to be motivated. So then people get drawn into debt. If somebody wants to use video for their business, for example, if their pain point is that they don't have any customers, and they start getting out of their comfort zone, they start doing things like video and other marketing for their business, as soon as they get some customers and they don't have the pain of no cash flow, then they stop doing it again. So that's why I don't think that pain or fear is a really good motivator, because it motivates intensely while that pain or while that fear is there, but it ceases to motivate as soon as that goes away. So as soon as that stimulus goes away. And this is why you get people having this kind of up and down effect. Things are going really, really well, and then something goes wrong, and things go really well, and things go wrong. That's where you get the inconsistency of results when we're motivated by fear. On the other hand, when we're motivated by wanting something and desire, that's when we actually do make progress, because that's when we start to move towards something, and it continues to be a motivator because we get closer and closer. In fact, when we go towards something, the closer we get to it, the more motivated we become. So the motivation actually increases when we're going towards something we want, as opposed to when we're going away from something we don't want, the motivation decreases. So that's something we need to think about with that. Now I'm just going to turn on the Q&A questions, because I see that it's not actually on. So the Q&A should be now on. So you can now have questions if you'd like to. So it says, take inventory of yourself as you read this and find out how many of the ghosts stand in your way. Before you can put any portion of the Think and Grow Rich philosophy into successful use, your mind must be prepared to receive it. The preparation is not difficult. It begins with study, analysis, and an understanding of 3 enemies, which you shall have to clear out. These are indecision, doubt, and fear. It says the 6th sense will never function while these 3 negatives or any one of them remains in your mind. The members of this unholy trio are closely tied. Where one is found, the other 2 are close at hand. So if you have fear, you're going to have indecision and doubt nearby. If you have indecision, then doubt and fear are going to be nearby, and vice versa. It says indecision is the seedling of fear. So do you remember a couple of weeks ago when I spoke about the terror barrier, and how when we're up against terror barrier, when we're about to break through, we experience fear, doubt, and confusion. This is something to really think about this, because that indecision, the doubt, the fear, if it's facing us when we're right up against the terror barrier, we know that all we need to do is break through and go through, follow through. But what if we don't know why it's there? What if that's what we're used to living with? Well, that's a question that you're going to have to ask, I think, or answer for yourself, is how much indecision or doubt and fear do you have in your life, and how much do you want? Because it's really a question of what's going to serve you to get to the next level and what's not, what's going to hold you back. So if you feel that there's a lot of indecision, doubt, and fear around, then get together with somebody or let me know and I can help you to work through that indecision, to get some clarity. Because when we have indecision, we don't know what we don't want, and we don't know what we do want. In fact, we get very confused. Whereas when we have some clarity and we know exactly what we do want, it's so much easier to know and see a plan to actually go through with that and to follow through. So I really like to know exactly what I do want, and to focus on that, because that's when you start to make progress. So let's continue with the epilogue. This is the epilogue in Think and Grow Rich. On page 240, which is the second page of this chapter, he says, before we can master an enemy, we must know its name, its habits, and its place of abode. As you read, analyze yourself carefully and determine if any of the 6 common fears have attached themselves to you. So I love the way that he puts this, that you haven't had any choice in it, they've just attached themselves to you. Well, we do know that there's a little bit of choice, but sometimes circumstances make things happen, and we don't have a lot of say in it. It's only when we become aware of it that we do have a say. But when we are young and when we are in a certain environment, we don't know that we have a choice. But now that we're having this conversation, we do know that we have a choice. And I've just noticed that the lens on my laptop is probably a little bit fuzzy, so I'm just going to give it a little clean. So if you excuse me, I'm going to lose the camera for a second. There we go. That'll probably be better. There we go. Is that a bit clearer? Good. Thank you for that. The joy of technology. So the 6 basic fears that he talks about. Before I get onto these, I want to say one thing. We can work on our weaknesses as much as we like, and they'll never be absolute awesome strengths. But if we work on our strengths, they can be really, really awesome. They can be the standout. They can be the difference between good and great. So while I agree with Napoleon Hill in terms of we need to master an enemy, I don't think that we give this undue attention. I think that we really need to focus more on our strengths rather than spending all our time on some of the weaknesses. So I just wanted to cover that before we went any further. So let's get into this and take it a little bit further. The 6 basic fears he's talking about: the fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love of someone, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. All other fears of minor importance, they can be grouped under these 6 headings. So I wonder which of those 6 basic fears you ever suffer from: the fear of poverty, criticism, ill health, loss of love, old age, or death. Well, here's one thing for sure: we're all going to die at some point. So we can either worry about it, or we can just let it happen when it's going to happen and not have it occupy our mind. But I wonder, a lot of people that I've spoken to in these Think and Grow Rich mastermind groups have really resonated with the fear of criticism and worrying about what other people think of them. So do you have a fear, or do you, not a fear, do you have a concern? Do you ever wonder what other people are going to think? I know that's something that I had to overcome before I did all these videos, was thinking about criticism. Now I've got over that, thank goodness, and I don't attract a lot of it. I attract mostly compliments, which is good. And if you have that sort of attitude, that's what you will attract as well. You know, when we are fearing criticism, we probably get more of it. Whereas when we decide it doesn't really matter, then it's a lot easier. You may even be thinking, oh, Jill, that's all very well for you, but you don't know my family. You don't know the people around me. You don't know the people I work with. You don't know my partner. No, I don't. But I do know we have choice now. Now that you become aware of this, we have a choice. You can either focus on what other people are going to think, or you can focus on what you really want, what's important for you. So this goes from the way you raise your children. This goes from the way you run your business. This goes for the way you look for a job, if that's what you're wanting. It goes for everything. Decide what you want and then go after that. Don't worry about what other people think. Fears are nothing more than states of mind. As has been demonstrated repeatedly in the chapters of this book, one's state of mind is subject to control and direction. On the next page, he says, an individual can create nothing which he or she does not first conceive in the form of an impulse of thought. Following the statement comes another of still greater importance, namely that thought impulses begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent, whether these thoughts are voluntary or involuntary. So thought impulses begin immediately to translate themselves into their physical equivalent. So what does this mean? Did you ever have a chalkboard at school? Do you remember having a chalkboard, a black and white chalkboard? Of course, the kids of these days don't know what chalkboards are. They just have whiteboards. But do you remember that chalkboard, if somebody would scrape their nails on that chalkboard, like really, scratch it? So I can almost feel that vibration. And you probably can too. And when I'm with a group, I can normally see at least half the group, sometimes even 90% of the group, physically shudder. So what's happened there is I've planted a seed of a thought into your mind about the chalkboard. There's no chalkboard here. In fact, you're not even here with me. There's no chalkboard here. I made no noise. And yet your body vibrated. Your body had that kind of feeling. Even if you don't, I know you know what I'm talking about. So I planted a thought, which was a thought impulse, into one's mind, and the physical equivalent, the body, then responded to that thought of that chalkboard. So that's how quickly it happens. We plant the seed, the idea, and that's how quickly the body responds. Isn't that amazing? It's a little bit like thinking of lemon. Imagine biting into lemon. We can almost feel the sharpness on the tongue. That's a thought that has entered our mind, and our body responds. Pavlov had some dogs, which you probably heard of the Pavlovian response. He had dogs and he found their mouths started to water when he put food in front of them. What he also did is he made a noise. I think he had a whistle, and he whistled whenever he put the food down. So he noticed after a period of time, after continuously doing this repeatedly, whenever he whistled, the dogs would their mouths would start to water. So he created that connection between the whistle and the food and the mouth starting to water. But when he took the food away, their response continued. So it's a little bit the same as what we're talking about in terms of the thought impulses entering our mind and our body having the same equivalent. There's an experiment which you might have actually heard about where they got a group of monkeys. And what do monkeys love to eat? They love to eat bananas. I remember when we lived in Richards Bay, the monkeys actually used to come into the house and take bananas from the children, which was a little bit frightening. They would get in through the burglar bars and they would come and help themselves eating fruit in the fruit tray, particularly bananas. So these monkeys were in this room, in this cage, and they put bananas on this pole in the middle of the cage. So of course, what do the monkeys do? They race for the bananas. They also had a set of sprinklers in this cage. And as soon as a monkey touched the pole and started climbing up the pole to go for the bananas, they turned the sprinkler system on and every single monkey throughout the group got wet. Not just the one that was on the pole, but every single monkey got wet. They did this a couple of times until no monkeys touched that pole. No monkeys went to the bananas. So the bananas were sitting there getting riper and riper, even going right off, and not one of the monkeys would touch them because they had got wet once too often. What they then did is they started replacing one monkey at a time. And they would take one old monkey out and one monkey in. Well, of course, what did this new monkey do? Because it didn't know, it would race for the pole. Do you know what the other monkeys did? They would grab that monkey and pull it down before the sprinklers would go out because they hate getting wet. So because they were so used to seeing, as soon as there was a monkey on the pole, the sprinklers came on, they would pull this monkey back. Do you know that they replaced every single original monkey with a new monkey, and still the bananas stayed on the pole and didn't get eaten? Even though all those new monkeys had never got wet, they had got so used to pulling The new monkeys that came in, they didn't know why they pulled the latest monkey down off the pole and stopped him from getting there. They just did it because everybody else did it. So that Pavlovian response, that routine repetition thought process got into the second generation of monkeys, just as some of our thought processes have come down through generations of our family. And we don't even know why we have why we do things. It's just because that's how it's always been done around here. So if you're at a company and you ever say or hear, well, that's just the way things are done around here, that indicates that probably somebody doesn't understand why it's done like that. It's just that's the way it's been done. That's a good reason to challenge that whole behavior. So let's get back to that thought impulses. So what happened with those monkeys is it started off with a real experiment. The first set of monkeys really did give wet, so they did not want anybody to go for those bananas. But the second generation of monkeys that had been brought in one by one had learnt this behavior. And so what happened when that thought impulse of a monkey running for bananas came into their mind, they grabbed that monkey. So their physical equivalent came in. Thought impulses, which are picked up by mere chance from sources outside one's own mind, thoughts created in other minds, may determine one's financial, business, professional, or social destiny, just as surely as do the thought impulses which one creates by intent and design. Now, the nice thing is we can now design our thought impulses. We can now look at all the behaviors that we've had before, and this is something I love to do, is work with each person on what particular beliefs, thought impulses, behaviors that you've had before, that you've been raised with. Which ones are going to serve you? Which ones are not? Which ones are going to hold you back? Because it's really about which one's going to serve you as opposed to whether it's right or wrong. It's only right for you if it's going to serve you, but what's right for you could be wrong for somebody else and vice versa. So it doesn't always help to get opinions from those around you because they've probably got very similar thoughts and beliefs to you because you've been talking about these things for so long, or maybe not talking about specifically these thought impulses, but because you've been having conversations or you've been with somebody for so long. Further down the page, it says, nature has endowed human beings with absolute control over only one thing, and that is thought. So that's the only thing we've got total control over. This fact, coupled with the additional fact that everything that human beings create begins in the thought of a thought, an idea, leads one very near to the principle by which fear may be mastered. If it is true that all thought has a tendency to clothe itself in its physical equivalent, and this is true beyond any doubt, it's equally true that thought impulses of fear and poverty cannot be translated into terms of courage and financial gain. The people of America began to think of poverty following the Wall Street crash of 1929. Slowly but surely, that mass thought was crystallized into its physical equivalent, which was known as depression. This had to happen in conformity with the laws of nature. So isn't that interesting that not only do we respond, our body and our thoughts and our mind, but if we have enough people believing the same thing, it starts to have a physical equivalent around it. Do you know that they did a meditation experiment? I think it was Deepak Chopra, and I can't remember who else was involved. But they decided to meet in a venue, and I think it was somewhere in the States. And they decided to meet in this venue, and I think there were about 1,000 people. You can look up the exact details. I'm not high in detail. This is the concept that I'm thinking about. They decided to meet in this venue, and they decided to have a 3-hour meditation session and pray for world peace. Do you know they measured the crime stats in the areas for 5 kilometers around where they were meeting? And the crime actually went down over the next couple of weeks. From that moment when they started meditating, it had an effect over the next couple of weeks. How can you scientifically back that up? It's really, really hard. We have to know that what we do does have an impact on other people. And if we can do it on a mass scale with other people, it has an impact. Think of the changes that have happened in the last 40, 50, 60 years, beyond my lifetime anyway, but other people have spoken about it. The changes in what women could do in the 1950s compared to what women can do now. There have been huge paradigm shifts. The changes in terms of what minority groups feel then compared to now. There have been huge changes. The changes in terms of what we believe about ourselves and about other people has changed. Every decade, I've noticed a shift both in myself and in everything around me in terms of how we think about ourselves, what we're capable of. Think about the shift in technology, just in my lifetime and your lifetime. When we were at school, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have internet. We didn't have, we had computers when I got to high school. I think we did Apple Basic. Was it Basic? I can't remember. Basic programming of some description. I wasn't any good at it. But that was the extent of our involvement in computers. I'd actually forgotten about that. But those screens were green, and they had a little bit of black writing, or black screen with green writing. Nothing like the color that we have now. Nothing like this, that we can actually talk to each other, irrespective of where you are in the world. So the changes that we've had around us are huge. And yet, why do we keep with the same thoughts that have been hanging around for decades? We can change them now. We can change them. That's a fun thing. So let's flip a little bit further into this chapter. And let's go to page 248. If you're using the same version of Think and Grow Rich as I am, it's on page 248. Now, the fear of criticism, it says, just how humanity originally came by this fear, no one can state definitely. But one thing is certain, people have it in a highly developed form. I'm inclined to attribute the basic fear of criticism to that part of inherited human nature which prompts people not only to take away the goods and wares of others, but to justify their action by criticism of their victor's character. It is well known, in fact, that thieves will criticize from whom they steal, and that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, by attempting to besmirch their opponent. We all know what happens in politics, or what we think happens in politics from the outside. I was about to say, we probably don't know from the inside. It says the fear of criticism takes on many forms, the majority of which are petty and trivial. So I've noticed here in Australia, we have this tall poppy syndrome. And so people are afraid of being criticized, of trying to achieve too much or do too much, or who am I to be fabulous? Who am I to step out and say things? That's why I love Marianne Williamson's poem, Who Am I to Be Fabulous? Well, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. You have been born to do exactly what you need to do and to stand out for who you are. Those are not her words at the end, of mine. But it's a good idea. Look up her poem. I've got it on my blog, evolvedynamic.net. You can see it there as well. But her words are really, really true and really powerful in terms of if we can step up and own who you are without fear of criticism, it frees other people up too. And even if you don't do it for yourself, do it for your children and do it for the next generation and do it for your friends. You know, if you are able to stand up and say what you want, then they also feel free to stand up and say what they want as well. If everyone's fearing the criticism, then nobody stands up. So let's go a little bit further on, and we're going to be covering some quite nice in-depth things. So on page 264, there's a self-analysis test questions. If you haven't already done this, try and go through this test, this questionnaire, because it's really useful to go through and see what issues are worrying you. Like I said, I prefer to work on strengths, but sometimes it is a good idea to look at the weaknesses as well. On page 270, it says, mind control is a result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical of all methods for controlling the mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose backed by a definite plan. So this is going back a couple of chapters where he talks about definite purpose and the organized planning. Study the records of any individuals who achieve noteworthy success, and you'll observe that they have control over their own mind, moreover, that they exercise that control and direct it towards the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. Okay, now he goes into the 57 famous alibis, and he goes through everything from if I didn't have a wife and family, or for women, if I didn't have a husband and family, if I had enough pull, if I had enough money, if. So if you had all the right things, then you might be successful. But they are just alibis. Because what you'll discover is when you have whatever you think you want to have, you'll discover that wasn't what was holding you back. If you think money is holding you back right now, it's not the money, it's your own self-belief that's holding you back. The last one out of that list, he says, if, and this is the greatest of them all, if I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. Then I might have a chance to profit by my mistakes and learn something from the experience of others. For I know that there's something wrong with me, or I would now be where I would have been if I'd spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis with which to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is as fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. An alibi is a child of one's own imagination. It's human nature to defend one's own brainchild. So there's most of the epilogue. So I'd like to invite you to read the whole epilogue and to go through all of this. I really love seeing some of these alibis because, you know, it just makes us remember how we do use excuses. And sometimes they are just excuses. They are not real. Some of the fears that we have are just ideas that have come up in our own mind. Do you know that stress is our thought process as to what the issue is and what our resources are to deal with it? And if we feel we don't have the resources to deal with it, whatever it is, that's when we get stressed. So it's really important to actually build up our resilience, to build up our mindset, to build up tools in our toolkit so we feel we can deal with anything, because then we don't get stressed out. There's obviously other things that involve our ability to handle stress, things like diet, exercise, sleep. I know when I've had ample sleep, I can deal with anything. I haven't had enough sleep. There's not a lot I can deal with. And likewise with food, if I've eaten properly, can you deal with anything? If there's been too much sugar or not enough protein, then it's a little bit harder. So it comes back to self-management, and it comes back to deciding what you want and what is going to serve you to get there, what's going to help you to get there. So we've been through the whole of Think and Grow Rich, or most of the chapters together over the last 7 weeks, and I really, really enjoyed it. And thank you for being part of it. Thank you for listening. What are you going to do with this information going forward? What are you going to apply into your business? Who is holding you accountable for that? Some people ask me to hold them accountable, which I'm quite happy to do. So let me know if that's what you want. What I'd be holding you accountable for is to be accountable to your own, who you really are, to be more of who you are, to be more of yourself. Somebody asked me this morning about when I was going through an extended disc profile with them, because I do behavior profiling for each person and see what your true nature is, your true behavioral style, personality. And she said, am I supposed to be something different? Am I supposed to be aiming to be kind of over there? And I said, no, you need to be aiming to be comfortable where you are and do more of what you're good at and let your own light shine. That's really what you need to do. Because if you feel you've got to change and be something that you're not, that's not really going to serve you. If you know what you want and you know where you want to be, then you know which aspects of their personality that you need to adapt. If you don't know where you want to be, then you have no clue as to where you need to change things. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for this time together. If you need more information, I do have more information on my blog, www.evolvedynamic.com. I also have a website on www.jillhatchison.com. You can find more information about me there. And if you'd like to do some coaching, feel free to reach out. I'm on Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn. So you can reach out to me, Jill Hutchison, at any of those places, and I'd be glad to help. You have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of your time as you read through Think and Grow Rich in your own time and you take some action on them. I'm sure that I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.